On February 22nd, something ancient begins to move. Not just in your life, but across generations. This is not another ordinary date passing on a calendar. This is a divine marker, a spiritual intersection, a moment that has been quietly approaching while you were waiting, wondering, and perhaps even doubting. And now the message is urgent, open before midnight. Because what is unfolding is not random. It is not coincidence. It is not wishful thinking. It is a generational shift that has been authorized in the heavenly realm. And Archangel Michael confirms it. For months, maybe even years, you have carried the memory of being dismissed. A financial authority, someone with influence, power, or the final say, looked at your proposal, your request, your potential, and decided you were not worthy. They rejected you. They minimized you. They closed the door without fully seeing what was inside you. And what hurt the most was not just the financial loss. It was the dismissal of your value. The feeling of being overlooked when you knew you carried something greater. That moment etched itself into your memory. But here is what you did not know. Heaven recorded that moment too. February 22nd is not just a date. It is a signal. In the spiritual realm, dates can act as gates. And this date carries the energy of alignment and reversal. A generational shift means something far deeper than a temporary breakthrough. It means a long-standing pattern is being corrupted. It means cycles that have followed your bloodline. Cycles of financial delay, rejection by authority, being the overlooked one in the room, are being confronted and dismantled. What you experienced was not isolated. It was connected to something older. Something that ran before you were born. But it will not run past you. When the message says open before midnight, it is not merely about a clock striking 12. Midnight represents a threshold. It is the dividing line between what was and what is about to be. In scripture and in spiritual history, midnight has always been the hour when chains fall, when announcements are made, when sudden reversals occur. It is the hour when silence breaks, and the instruction to open is symbolic. It means prepare your heart. Open your expectation. Open your faith. Because what is coming requires readiness. If you remain closed in disappointment, you may miss the movement that is already beginning. Archangel Michael does not speak lightly. He is known as a defender, a warrior, a protector of divine order. When his confirmation comes, it signals that something has moved beyond prayer into enforcement. The injustice you experienced did not go unnoticed. The dismissal was not brushed aside. There was a response in the unseen realm. And while you interpreted the delay as defeat, it was actually positioning. There were battles fought over your name that you never saw. There were accusations silenced. There were doors held closed because the timing was not yet correct. But now, something has shifted. A generational shift means the story changes direction with you. You are not just receiving restoration for yourself. You are becoming the turning point. The one who breaks the pattern. The one who proves that rejection was not the final chapter. And this is why the urgency exists. Because when shifts of this magnitude occur, they require awareness. They require participation. They require agreement. You cannot approach this casually. You cannot dismiss this message the way you were dismissed. The very authority who once overlooked you is being repositioned. Circumstances are aligning. Pride is being softened. And recognition is being prepared. This is why the title carries such weight. On February 22nd, a generational shift is underway. Archangel Michael confirms a financial authority who dismissed you will return. Open before midnight. Every phrase matters. The shift is already underway. Not coming. Not someday. Underway. The confirmation had been given. The return is not speculation. It is alignment. And the instruction to open is your activation. Because when they return, it will not look the same. The posture will be different. The tone will be different. The power dynamic will be different. What once felt like humiliation will become validation. But before we go further, understand this. The return is not about revenge. It is about restoration. It is about divine balance. It is about correcting a narrative that was prematurely closed. The authority who dismissed you may not even fully understand why they feel compelled to revisit what they once rejected. They may not realize that a higher authority has intervened. But you will. And when that moment arrives, you will remember this date. You will remember that something shifted in the atmosphere before it manifested in the natural. So do not treat February 22nd lightly. Do not brush aside the urgency of midnight. Something is aligning in ways you cannot yet see. The same system that once denied you is preparing to acknowledge you. The same voice that once said no is being repositioned to reconsider. And what makes this different is that it is not just about one opportunity. It is about a generational rewrite. A cycle ending. A door reopening. A name being cleared. And it begins now. The clock is moving. The shift is underway. And you were meant to hear this before midnight. Think back to the exact moment it happened. The email that felt colder than expected. The meeting that ended too quickly. The call where their tone shifted from interest to indifference. You walked in carrying preparation, vision, and hope. You walked out carrying silence. A financial authority, someone with the power to approve, fund, promote, or release what you needed, looked at your work, your proposal, your qualifications, and dismissed you. They may not have used harsh words. They may have even smiled blithely. But the decision was clear. Not now. Not you. Not approved. And in that instant, something inside you tightened. It was not just disappointment. It was a sting that went deeper. Because you knew you were capable. You knew you had done the work. You knew this opportunity mattered. But instead of advancement, you received rejection. Instead of validation, you received silence. And for many of you, this was not the first time. It felt familiar. Like a pattern repeating itself. Authority figures overlooking you. Doors closing at the final moment. Financial breakthroughs slipping through your fingers just when they seemed within reach. But hear this clearly. That moment was not the end of your story. It was a chapter, not a conclusion. What looked like finality was actually interruption. You assumed the decision was sealed, stamped, and archived. Yet in the spiritual realm, it was flagged. It was reviewed. It was not allowed to rest in permanent status. What you interpreted as human denial was actually divine delay. There is a difference, and that difference changes everything. When that authority dismissed you, they believed they were making a business decision. They believed they were exercising logic, risk assessment, or personal judgment. But there are moments when human authority unknowingly steps into a larger script. They may think they are closing a file, yet heaven sees the larger blueprint. And if the timing is not aligned, if your preparation is not complete, if the environment is not yet ready to sustain your elevation, the door will not open, no matter how qualified you are. Not because you are unworthy, but because premature access can create permanent damage. The pain of dismissal often carries a hidden gift, refinement. After that rejection, you questioned yourself. You reviewed your steps. You sharpened your skills. You became more strategic, more discerning. You may have even withdrawn for a season, choosing silence over exposure. And while you felt sidelined, something deeper was happening. Your character was being strengthened. Your foundation was being reinforced. The very areas that would be tested when the opportunity returns were being fortified in private. And yes, the opportunity will return. Not because you chased it, not because you forced it, but because alignment is shifting. The same authority who dismissed you is being repositioned. Circumstances in their world are changing. Pressures they did not foresee are emerging. Needs they did not anticipate are surfacing. And suddenly, what they once overlooked now becomes necessary. What they once dismissed now appears valuable. They may not even consciously connect it to you at first, but the shift is guiding their attention back to the place they once closed. This is why you must not internalize rejection as identity. Being dismissed does not mean you are insignificant. It means the timing was incomplete. And February 22nd marks the beginning of completion. A generational shift does not only break family patterns, it also corrects institutional narratives. You were labeled too small, too early, too risky, too unknown. But those labels were temporary. They were written in pencil, not ink. And what is written lightly can be erased swiftly when divine timing steps in. If this message resonates with your story, do not remain silent. Engage with it. Align with it. This is the moment to like this video as a sign of agreement that rejection will not define you. Share it with someone who has been overlooked, someone who feels forgotten by the very system they trusted. Comment your experience, not to relive the pain, but to declare that it was not the end. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel and become part of a community that understands prophetic timing. When you interact, you are not just boosting an algorithm. You are signaling alignment. You are saying, I receive this shift. And agreement activates movement. Understand this deeply. The authority who dismissed you did not close your destiny. They only put their role in it. They assumed they had the final say. But there is always a higher court, a higher oversight, a greater timing. And when the return happens, it will carry a different energy. You will not approach them with desperation. You will not shrink in their presence. You will stand with quiet confidence. Because you will know that this moment was orchestrated, not negotiated. So do not replay the dismissal with bitterness. Do not rehearse the words they hurt. That scene was necessary. It exposed weaknesses that needed strengthening. It revealed areas that needed growth. It prepared you for elevation without collapse. And now, as February 22nd approaches, the same scene that once ended in silence is preparing for rewrite. The moment you were dismissed felt like a door slamming shut. But in truth, it was a door temporarily held closed for protection. And when it opens again, it will not creak with uncertainty. It will swing with authority. What you thought was over was simply paused. And now, the pause is ending. There is something you must understand at the deepest level of your spirit. Nothing that happened to you was overlooked in heaven. Every meeting, every email, every dismissive glance, every decision that pushed your name aside, that was all recorded. Not just in memory, but in divine record. When that financial authority rejected you, it may have felt like your voice disappeared into silence. But in the unseen realm, it echoed. And heaven does not ignore echoes of injustice. You may have wondered if anyone truly saw what happened. You may have questioned whether it even mattered. After all, people are rejected every day. Opportunities close every hour. Systems move on without explanation. But this was not random. This was connected to something larger. When you were dismissed, it activated a spiritual response. Because when destiny is delayed by human limitation, heaven intervenes. There is a spiritual law of remembrance. What is unjustly dismissed does not dissolve. It waits for correction. You thought time was burying the situation. You assumed it was fading into the past. But while you were trying to move forward, something else was moving behind the scenes. Archangel Michael, the defender of divine order, does not stand passive when assignments are obstructed. His role is not only protection, it is enforcement. When a narrative is prematurely closed, he ensures it is reviewed. This is why February 22nd carries such weight. It is not merely a date on your calendar. It marks the release of what has been held in review. For a season, the situation was allowed to sit. Not because you were forgotten, but because preparation was unfolding. You were being strengthened. The authority who dismissed you was being observed, and the environment was being adjusted. Heaven and not recorrection. At times after you were rejected, you may have experienced silence. No updates. No follow-up. No reconsideration. That silence felt heavy, but silence in the spiritual realm does not equal inactivity. It often signals strategic movement. Think about it. If the return had happened too soon, you might have approached it with wounded emotion. If it had happened too late, you might have lost interest. Timing is everything. And February 22nd signals that timing has matured. The unseen battle that followed your dismissal was not about ego. It was about order. When a door closes that was meant to open, there is friction in the atmosphere. When potential is overlooked due to misjudgment, correction must occur. But correction does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like subtle shifts. Pressure building quietly in another person's world. Circumstances changing behind their desk. New needs arising that match exactly what you carry. And here is what is powerful. The very authority who dismissed you may not fully understand why they begin to think of you again. They may not realize why your name resurfaces in their mind. They may not connect it to February 22nd or to any spiritual alignment. But you will sense it. You will recognize the shift. Because something inside you has already been prepared for it. Heaven recorded your patience. Heaven recorded your restraint. Heaven recorded the nights you questioned yourself and still chose not to give up. And that record is not passive. It speaks. It testifies. It demands alignment. This is why the return is not random. It is legal in the spiritual sense. He is authorized it. And now, as this turning point approaches, you may feel a stirring. A subtle expectation rising again. Do not suppress it. Do not talk yourself out of hope. The same God who saw you when you were dismissed is the same God who orchestrates restoration. Nothing was forgotten. Not your effort. Not your integrity. Not your value. Type justice will speak in the comments if this resonates with you. Lesson code 642 is now activated. As you type it, you are not just commenting. You are aligning yourself with divine remembrance. You are declaring that what was overlooked will now be seen. And listen closely. What happens next will not only surprise you, it will confirm that this was never coincidence. There is a detail about the return that most people would never expect. And when you recognize it, you will know that heaven's record has been released into reality. You'll be grateful you stayed with this message, because the next revelation connects directly to how you must position yourself before midnight. The mission behind this message does not move by accident. Just as heaven records every injustice, it also records every act of obedience. When you sow into this work through Super Thanks, membership, or the PayPal link in the description, or even by scanning the PayPal QR code flashing on your screen, you are not supporting a platform. You are fueling a harvest of restored destinies. Scripture declares, "Give, and it will be given to you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over." This is not ancient text. It is God speaking directly to you now. And I hear in my spirit, I am inviting you to plant where chains are breaking. Your seed becomes oil in the lamp of someone who was about to give up. Move quickly. Obey the stirring. As you give, may open heavens respond over your finances, and may the same restoration promised to you overflow back into your house. Act now. A generational shift is not a small adjustment. It is not a temporary improvement. It is not a single answered prayer that fades with time. A generational shift is a rewriting of patterns that have repeated for decades. It is the interruption of cycles that seem normal simply because they were familiar. And when we say that on February 22nd a generational shift is underway, we are not speaking about surface-level success. We are speaking about roots being uprooted. Look closely at your history. Not just your personal experiences, but your family line. Has there been a pattern of financial struggle? A pattern of being close to opportunity but never fully stepping into it? A pattern where authority figures seemed supportive at first but ultimately withheld advancement? These patterns are rarely random. They form grooves in a family narrative. Over time, they become expectations. People begin to say, "This is just how it is for us." And without realizing it, they adapt to limitation. But a generational shift declares, it stops here. What makes this moment different is that it is not merely about you getting a second chance. It is about your entire bloodline experiencing a new trajectory because of your obedience and endurance. When the financial authority who dismissed you returns, it will not just be a personal vindication. It will signal that a pattern has been broken. The old story, where your family's ideas were overlooked, where your talents were undervalued, where your financial growth was delayed, will no longer be the dominant narrative. Generational strongholds are subtle. They do not always look dramatic. Sometimes they appear as recurring themes: hard work without recognition, talent without compensation, vision without backing. You may have grown up watching capable people in your family struggle to gain approval from systems that never fully embraced them. And perhaps, without even noticing, you carried the quiet fear that your story would repeat theirs. But February 22nd is not about repetition. It is about interruption. A generational shift happens when heaven decides that the cycle has run long enough. It happens when endurance has matured into readiness. It happens when one person in the line, often the one who faced the most resistance, becomes the hinge that swings the door in a new direction. You are not just a participant in this moment. You are the pivot point. And understand this: when cycles break, resistance often increases before it collapses. That is why the dismissal you experienced felt so intense. It was not just a routine rejection. It carrying weight because it was confronting something old. The authority who said no was unknowingly standing at the intersection of history. Your decision seemed final, but it was actually the last echo of a fading pattern. Now, as the shift begins, you may sense both anticipation and unease. That is normal. When familiar limitations begin to loosen, it can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. You have learned how to survive in the old pattern. You have learned how to manage disappointment. But thriving in a new pattern requires a different mindset. It requires expectation instead of caution. It requires boldness instead of quiet endurance. The return of the financial authority is symbolic as much as it is practical. It represents systems acknowledging what they once overlooked. It represents influence recognizing value. It represents doors reopening not out of pity but out of necessity. And when that happens, something inside your family line shifts. Younger generations will see what was once impossible become normal. Conversations at family tables will change. Instead of speaking about missed chances, they will speak about breakthroughs. This is why the phrase generational shift must not be minimized. It is larger than a contract, larger than an approval, larger than a financial increase. It is about identity. For years, perhaps even generations, there has been a subtle narrative whispering, "We don't get chosen." But that whisper is losing its power. The moment the authority who dismissed you returns, that narrative cracks. You must also understand that generational shifts require responsibility. When patterns break, new standards must be established. You cannot carry forward the mindset of scarcity into a season of abundance. You cannot step into restored opportunity with the fear of past rejection controlling your decisions. The shift demands growth and demands maturity. It demands that you see yourself differently. And here is something profound. Generational shifts often begin quietly. They do not always announce themselves with noise. Sometimes they begin with a phone call, an email, a reconsideration, a meeting request that feels strangely familiar. And in that ordinary-looking moment, history bends. You may not immediately see the full impact, but years from now, you will look back at February 22nd and recognize it as the dividing line. A moment when all was turned into established. A moment when dismissal turned into validation. A moment when the cycle that followed your family finally ran out of strength. The authority who dismissed you believed they were making a contained decision. They did not realize they were participating in a larger story. But now, that story is turning. The same system that once felt closed is preparing to cooperate. The same voice that once doubted is preparing to acknowledge. This is the meaning of a generational shift. What was predictable becomes unprecedented. What was inherited becomes interrupted. And what once felt like destiny's ceiling becomes the floor of your next season. There is a reason the message does not say the financial authority might return. It says they will return. That language is intentional. It carries certainty. Because this is not about chance reconciliation or emotional closure. It is about spiritual law. When something is unjustly dismissed, when potential aligned with purpose is prematurely denied, correction becomes necessary. And correction requires the involvement of the one who made the original decision. In the natural world, decisions appear final. A signature ends a contract. A declined proposal closes a file. A rejected application moves into archives. But in the spiritual realm, finality belongs to a higher authority. Human decisions operate within limited vision. They assess risk. They measure numbers. They calculate short-term outcomes. But divine timing operates beyond spreadsheets and projections. It evaluates purpose. It measures readiness. It protects destiny. When that financial authority dismissed you, they believed they were concluding a matter. They likely moved on quickly. Another meeting. Another file. Another opportunity to approve or deny. But while they shifted their attention elsewhere, the situation did not dissolve. It remained active in a higher court. Because your dismissal was not simply a business choice. It intersected with assignment. Restoration is not random. It follows order. and order requires that what was mishandled be revisited. This is why the same authority must return. Not a replacement. Not a secondary figure. The original source of dismissal must confront the revised reality. This is how balance is restored. This is how narratives are corrected. This is how generational shifts solidify. You may wonder why it matters who returns. Why not just open a new door with someone else? Why not move forward without looking back? And sometimes, that is exactly how breakthrough happens. But this moment is different. This moment is about reversal. It is about the transformation of perception. The one who once saw you as unready must now see you as essential. The one who once underestimated you must now acknowledge your growth. There is also something deeper at work. Authority carries influence beyond a single decision. When someone in power dismisses you, it can quietly affect how others perceive you. Doubt spreads subtly. Silence can be misinterpreted as deficiency. But when that same authority reopens the conversation, it sends a new signal. It behaves perception. It communicates value. Their return does more than offer opportunity. It restores credibility. Pride often resists correction. No one enjoys revisiting a decision that proved premature. Yet timing has a way of humbling certainty. Circumstances change. Markets shift. Needs evolve. What once seemed unnecessary can suddenly become vital. And when this shift occurs, the authority who dismissed you will feel the tension of reconsideration. They may not admit it openly, but they will recognize that something has changed. You must understand. This is not about humiliation. It is about alignment. The return is not designed to shame them. It is designed to reposition both of you. They are being drawn back not because they failed, but because the season has changed. And when seasons change, roles adjust. The authority who once held exclusive control over the outcome will now stand in a different posture. Not above you, not dismissing you, but evaluating you through new eyes. Divine reversal does not erase the past. It reframes it. The dismissal you endured becomes part of the testimony. It becomes evidence of endurance, evidence of preparation, evidence that your value was never dependent on immediate approval. And when the return happens, you will carry yourself differently. You will not approach the conversation with desperation. You will not shrink to fit their expectations. You will stand anchored in quiet confidence. There is also a lesson embedded in this return. Restoration tests maturity. It is one thing to endure rejection. It is another thing to respond correctly when validation arrives. If resentment governs your reaction, the shift weakens. If arrogance replaces humility, the opportunity narrows. The return requires composure. It requires wisdom. It requires the ability to recognize that the same person who dismissed you is now part of your elevation. And here is something crucial. Their return may not begin with apology. It may begin with inquiry. A subtle message. A neutral tone. A professional request to revisit what was once declined. Do not misinterpret the lack of dramatic acknowledgement. The fact that they are reaching out at all is the signal. The shift does not need theatrics. It needs alignment. This is why February 22nd matters. It marks the release of pressure that has been building quietly. The authority who once felt secure in their decision will now sense the necessity of reconsideration. Doors that seem permanently closed will show signs of movement. Conversations that felt impossible will reappear. And when they return, remember this: it was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving that timing governs outcomes. It was about demonstrating that rejection cannot override assignment. It was about revealing that destiny bends, but it does not break. The authority must return because the story requires completion. The cycle requires closure. The shift requires acknowledgement. And what was once dismissed must now be seen through the clarity of new alignment. There is a reason the instruction says, "Open before midnight." It is not poetic exaggeration. It is not grammatic language meant to stir emotion. It is prophetic timing. Midnight represents a threshold. It is the dividing line between what was and what is about to begin. It is the final moment of one day and the silent birth of another. And throughout spiritual history, midnight has always carried the weight of reversal. Midnight is when situations that looked permanent suddenly shift. It is when chains fall without warning. It is when announcements break through silence. It is when what seemed delayed moves into acceleration. The world may be asleep at midnight, but the spiritual realm is not. It is an hour of transactions, an hour of enforcement, an hour when decrees that were prepared in quiet are released into action. When you hear "open before midnight," understand that this is about readiness. It is about posture. It is about alignment. You cannot control when another person reaches out. You cannot control the exact wording of the message you will receive. But you can control whether your heart is open or closed. Midnight exposes your posture. Are you still carrying resentment? Are you bracing for disappointment? Or are you positioned in expectation? Here is something profound about thresholds. They are narrow. They require intentional crossing. You cannot drift through a threshold. You must step. And stepping requires awareness. February 22nd is not simply another day on the calendar. It is a threshold date. A spiritual hinge. A moment when the old narrative ends and a new one begins. But hinges move doors only when there is willingness to open. Midnight also represents hidden work. While you were enduring rejection, while you were navigating silence, while you were wondering if the dismissal defined your future, preparation was happening in secret. The authority who rejected you was changing. The environment around them was shifting. Needs were evolving. Pressures were mounting. And you were being refined. Often, we want reversal to happen in daylight, publicly, visibly, dramatically. But many reversals begin in darkness. They begin quietly, subtly, an internal realization forming in someone's mind. A recognition that something valuable was overlooked. A sense that a decision should be revisited. Midnight is the incubation of that realization. When the clock approaches 12, there is tension. It is the final stretch. The last minutes before transition. And that tension mirrors what you may be feeling now. A mix of anticipation and uncertainty. A stirring that something is near, yet not fully visible. That tension is not accidental. It is the atmosphere of change. But here is the key. Midnight does not force doors open. It presents opportunity. The instruction to open is directed at you. It means do not let past disappointment close your expectation. Do not let fear of repeat rejection harden your response. If the message comes, if the call arrives, if the conversation reopens, you must be emotionally ready. Supernatural reversal requires natural composure. If you react from wounded pride, you must step at the threshold. If you respond with suspicion rather than clarity, you weaken the shift. Midnight demands steadiness. It demands that you stand centered, not shaken. And understand this, not every reversal announces itself loudly. Some arrive in simple language. A neutral tone. A practical request to revisit a previous discussion. Do not underestimate small beginnings. The power of midnight is not in noise, it is in transition. When the calendar flips, it does not shout. They shift it. The authority who dismiss you may reach out in a way that seems almost ordinary, but you will feel the weight behind it. You will sense that this is not routine, that something is different, that the posture has changed, and in that moment, you will realize that the instruction to open before midnight was preparation, not pressure. Midnight also symbolizes accountability. What was spoken during the day is tested at night. What was decided casually must stand under deeper evaluation. When February 22nd approaches its midnight hour, it carries with it the culmination of everything that has been building. It is the release point. There is another dimension to midnight. It marks endings as much as beginnings. The old pattern that followed your family line, the cycle of dismissal, the narrative of almost, but not quite, loses authority at the threshold. It cannot cross into the new day unless you invite it. That is why readiness matters. You must decide that rejection does not follow you forward. When the moment arrives, you may feel a calm clarity, a sense that this was always meant to happen, just not when you expected. That is the sign of divine timing. It will not rush. It aligns. So as the hours move toward midnight, do not panic. Do not overanalyze. Position yourself. Reflect. Release any bitterness. Strengthen your composure. Because supernatural reversal favors those who are prepared. Midnight is not the end of your story. It is the turning page. It is the quiet second when yesterday expires and tomorrow takes its first breath. And when the authority who once dismissed you re-enters the conversation, you will know that the threshold has been crossed. Before every visible return, there is an invisible test. Before every reopened door, there is a season where nothing seems to move. And if you look honestly at your journey since the dismissal, you will recognize that you have been in a testing period. Not a punishment. Not abandonment. A test. After the financial authority said no, something shifted inside you. At first, it was shock. Then disappointment. Then perhaps a quiet questioning, was I wrong? Did I misread the opportunity? Am I truly ready? These questions were not weaknesses. They were part of the refinement. Testing exposes what confidence is built on. If your identity had been anchored only in approval, rejection would have crushed you permanently. But instead, you stood back up. Slowly. Quietly. You continued. Testing seasons rarely announce themselves. They disguise themselves as delays, as silence, as watching others move ahead while you remain stationary. You may have seen colleagues gain approval. You may have watched similar ideas succeed elsewhere. And the temptation to compare must have whispered loudly. Why them? Why not me? Why now? Why not then? This comparison was part of the test. Would you allow someone else's progress to poison your perspective? Would you let envy erode your endurance? Or would you continue preparing, even when there was no immediate sign of reward? The truth is, the return of the authority requires a stronger version of you than the one who first approached them. If the door had opened back then, you might have entered with excitement but without full stability. Now, you carry something different. You carry experience. You carry resilience. You carry discernment. Testing seasons also refine emotional reactions. When you were first dismissed, your response may have been internal frustration. You may have replayed the conversation, wishing you had said more, wishing you had defended your position more strongly. But over time, the emotional charge lessened. Clarity replaced intensity. you began to see that the rejection did not define your value. It revealed your need for deeper grounding. There is another layer to testing: silence from the authority. No acknowledgement. It is one thing to be rejected. It is another thing to be ignored afterward. That silence tested your patience. It tested your restraint. It tested whether you would chase validation or trust timing. Many people fail in this stage. They attempt to force reconsideration. They send repeated messages. They push for attention. And in doing so, they close doors that timing would have reopened naturally. But you did not force. You stepped back. Even when it felt uncomfortable. Even when you feared that stepping back meant losing the opportunity forever. That restraint was part of your preparation. Testing also exposed hidden fears. Perhaps you feared that this rejection confirmed a deeper pattern in your life. A pattern of almost succeeding but never fully arriving. And that fear could have shaped your future decisions. It could have made you cautious, overly guarded, hesitant to present yourself again. But instead, you kept developing. Quietly. Without applause. And while you were refining, the authority who dismissed you was also being tested. Circumstances in their world began to shift. Needs evolved. Pressures increased. Decisions they once felt certain about may have proven less effective. What once seemed unnecessary may have started to look essential. They too were being positioned. You must understand that testing seasons are symmetrical. You were being strengthened internally. They were being adjusted externally. Both movements were necessary for alignment. There is a reason the return could not happen prematurely. If it had, your emotions might have overshadowed your wisdom. You might have approached the conversation eager to prove yourself rather than prepared to present yourself. Now, the urgency to prove has softened. You know your value without needing to announce it. Another test you faced was discouragement. The quiet thought that maybe it was time to give up on that particular door. Maybe it was time to shift direction entirely. And while there is wisdom in knowing when to pivot, this situation required patience, not abandonment. You held the vision loosely, but did not discard it completely. At balance, neither clinging nor quitting, was maturity forming. Testing seasons also measure humility. When the authority returns, and they will, your posture will matter. If testing had not softened pride or healed insecurity, the reunion could collapse under ego. But because you have walked through refinement, you will respond with composure. You may not have realized it at the time, but every quiet day was preparation. Every moment of doubt was strengthening. Every delay was aligning. The testing was not designed to weaken you. It was designed to stabilize you. Now, as February 22nd approaches, the testing phase is reaching completion. What was once uncertain is becoming clear. What once felt stalled is beginning to move beneath the surface. And when the authority who dismissed you re-enters the conversation, you will recognize something immediately. You are no longer the same person who first walked into that room. The return requires the refined version of you. And that is exactly who you have become. When the return begins, it may not look dramatic. It may not come with grand apologies or emotional confessions. In fact, it may begin in a way that feels almost ordinary. A short message. A neutral email. A professional tone that simply says they would like to revisit a previous discussion. But do not mistake simplicity for insignificance. What appears small on the surface will carry the weight of fulfillment underneath. The conversation that will shock you is not shocking because of loud words. It is shocking because of contrast. The same authority who once dismissed you will now speak with a different posture. You will notice it immediately. The sharp certainty they once carried will be softened. The finality that once closed the door will be replaced with openness. They may not reference the rejection directly at first, but their language will reveal reconsideration. You might hear phrases like, "We've been reviewing past proposals," or "The timing may be different now," or even, "Your idea has come back into focus." These words will seem casual, but you will feel their significance, because you remember the earlier tone. You remember the decisiveness. You remember how quickly the opportunity was set aside. And now, the same source of dismissal is initiating dialogue. This shift in tone is not accidental. It reflects the internal adjustments that have been taking place. Circumstances in their environment have changed. Pressures have redirected priorities. Needs have evolved. What once seemed unnecessary has become relevant. And without fully understanding why, they are drawn back to the very thing they once rejected. When the conversation unfolds, your greatest strength will be composure. You must resist the urge to remind them of their previous dismissal. You must resist the temptation to subtly highlight how wrong they were. The power of this moment lies in calm confidence. Let your growth speak. Let your preparation speak. Let your stability speak. There may also be a subtle acknowledgement embedded in the conversation. Not necessarily an apology, but an admission that circumstances are different now. They may say, "We might have overlooked certain aspects," or, "We see potential we didn't fully recognize before." That recognition is the crack in the old narrative. It is the evidence that the generational shift is real. You must also be prepared for surprise details. The return may involve terms more favorable than before. Conditions that once limited you may now be adjusted. Authority that once felt intimidating may now feel collaborative. And as this unfolds, you will sense that something larger than negotiation is taking place. Alignment is happening. But here is something deeper. The conversation will test your internal healing. If you still carry resentment, it will surface. If you still carry insecurity, it will whisper. This is why the testing season was necessary. You cannot enter a moment of reversal with the wounds of rejection still bleeding. The shift requires wholeness. As the dialogue progresses, you may notice something else. The authorities' respect. It may be subtle, but it will be present. They will listen differently. They will ask more questions. They will seek clarity rather than assert dominance. This is the reversal. The dynamic has changed. And perhaps the most shocking part will not be their words, but your reaction. You will realize you are not nervous in the same way. You are not desperate. You are not seeking validation. You are steady, grounded. Jern. The authorities' return does not inflate your ego. It confirms your preparation. This conversation is more than a professional exchange. It is a spiritual marker. It represents the collapse of a cycle that said, "You are almost ready but not quite." It represents the correction of a narrative that placed you on the outside. And when you recognize this, gratitude will replace bitterness. Type "The door is opening" in the comments if you feel this shift. Blessing code 819 is now activated. As you declare it, you are aligning yourself with readiness and composure. And hear this carefully. There is an element of this return that goes beyond opportunity. There is a detail hidden within the conversation that signals the shift is larger than one decision. It connects directly to your influence, your credibility, and your future positioning. What is about to be revealed next will show you that this was never just about money. You will want to understand this fully, because it determines how you carry yourself in the days ahead. What is happening here is not just a story. It is a movement. When you support this mission through Super Thanks, YouTube membership, or by giving through the PayPal link in the description or the PayPal QR code flashing on your screen, you are not funding content. You are sowing into restoration. The word says that when you cast your bread upon the waters, it returns after many days. This is that moment. I believe the Spirit is saying, I am giving you an opportunity to participate in someone else's reversal. Your seed becomes light in a dark midnight hour for thousands who are waiting for confirmation. Move now. Do not hesitate. As you give, may doors reopen in your own life with accelerated favor, and may the harvest attached to this message multiply back into your hands. Act in faith. When the financial authority returns, the shift will already be in motion. The conversation will be unfolding. The tone will be different. The posture will be adjusted. But there is something crucial you must understand. The magnitude of what happens next will depend on your response. The return is divinely aligned, but the outcome is still influenced by your posture. Reversal does not remove responsibility. In fact, it increases it. When someone who once dismissed you reopens the door, you stand at a delicate intersection. On one side is vindication. On the other side is wisdom. If you lean too heavily into vindication, you risk narrowing the opportunity. If you lean into wisdom, you expand it. This is not about proving a point. It is about stewarding a moment. Your first response must be calm clarity. Not rushed excitement, not guarded suspicion. Calm clarity. When they speak, listen carefully. When they ask questions, answer with precision. Do not over-explain. Do not shrink. Speak from the confidence of preparation. The testing season you walked through was building this very composure. There is also an emotional decision to make. You must release the need for them to fully acknowledge the past. They may not apologize directly. They may not revisit every detail of the dismissal. And that is okay. Closure does not always come through words. Sometimes it comes through opportunity. The fact that they returned is the acknowledgement. If you approach the moment carrying hidden resentment, it will subtly affect your tone. It will color your language. It will create tension where alignment is forming. But if you approach it with maturity, you elevate the conversation. You signal that you have grown beyond the wound. And that growth increases trust. Trust is the currency of authority. When they see that you are not reacting emotionally, but responding strategically, it shifts their perception further. They begin to view you not only as capable, but stable. Not only creative, but reliable. And reliability multiplies opportunity. This is also the moment to break the generational pattern fully. In the past, perhaps opportunities in your family line were mishandled due to fear or impulsiveness. Maybe past breakthroughs were sabotaged by insecurity or pride. But you are not repeating those mistakes. This is where the shift becomes permanent. Your response determines whether this is a temporary correction or a lasting elevation. Be measured in negotiation. Be clear in expectation. Do not undersell yourself out of gratitude. Gratitude is powerful, but it should not diminish your value. You have grown. You have refined your skills. You have strengthened your foundation. Let your terms reflect your maturity. At the same time, avoid arrogance. The goal is not to reverse the power dynamic in a way that humiliates them. The goal is alignment. Authority responds best to confidence balanced with humility. When you carry both, you create partnership rather than tension. And understand this. The magnitude of this return may extend beyond the original opportunity. What begins as a reconsideration could evolve into expanded responsibility. greater visibility, broader influence. Because when trust is restored and perception is corrected, doors tend to open wider than before. You must also guard your focus. When news of the return spreads, because it likely will, others may watch your response. They may remember the dismissal. They may be curious about how you handle the shift. Your composure becomes a testimony. It signals that you are ready for increased influence. This is why your response matters so deeply. It is not only about securing a contract or agreement. It is about demonstrating capacity for sustained elevation. Authority is watching not just your talent, but your temperament. If this message is speaking directly to you, engage with it. Like this video as a declaration that you will respond with wisdom. Share it with someone who needs to prepare for their own reversal. Comment below and declare, "I will answer with maturity." And if you have not already, subscribe and become part of this prophetic community. When you engage, you are aligning yourself with a mindset of readiness. You are declaring that you will not mishandle what is returning. There is also something subtle you must recognize. Your response influences how future authorities perceive you. When one influential figure repositions their view of you, others often follow. Your composure in this moment sets a precedent. It establishes a narrative of reliability. And here is the deeper truth. The return was divinely orchestrated, but the expansion is stewarded. If you answer wisely, the opportunity grows. If you answer emotionally, it contracts. The shift is underway, but your response determines its reach. So take a breath. Center yourself. Remember the testing season. Remember the refinement. Remember that this is not about revenge but restoration. The authority who dismissed you is now part of your elevation. And how you respond will decide how far this elevation goes. There is one more layer to this shift that most people overlook. It is not just about the reopened door. It is about the doors that will follow because of how you handle this one. And what comes next will reveal that this return was only the beginning of a much larger expansion. When the authority who once dismissed you returns, it will not be an isolated event. It will be the first visible sign that multiple financial doors are beginning to shift simultaneously. One conversation will trigger another. One reconsideration will unlock additional access. Because when alignment is restored at the source of rejection, it creates ripple effects. You must understand that financial doors are rarely standalone. They are connected to networks, systems, reputations, and timing. The original dismissal may have quietly influenced other opportunities without you realizing it. When someone in authority declines you, their silence can subtly shape how others perceive your readiness. But when that same authority reopens the conversation, it sends a new signal into the network. It communicates reconsideration. It communicates value. And value travels. The reopening may begin with something small, an updated proposal request, a meeting scheduled, a contract draft revised. But behind that small movement is a larger shift. Doors that once seemed permanently closed will begin to show signs of flexibility. Conversations that previously stalled will regain momentum. Contacts that went silent may resurface. What once felt stagnant will begin to move. You may receive an unexpected email from someone connected to the original authority. A collaborator. A partner. A department that previously had no interest. Suddenly, there will be openness. The same idea that once felt premature will now feel timely. The same qualifications that once seemed insufficient will now appear strategic. And here's something profound. The reopening may not just restore what was lost. It may expand it. The conditions that once limited your involvement could now be adjusted in your favor. Budgets may have increased. Priorities may have shifted. The scope of opportunity may be broader than it was before. This is how divine reversal works. It does not simply rewind. It recalibrates. As these doors reopen, your discernment must remain active. Not every reopened door is meant to be walked through in the same way. Some are confirmations. Some are stepping stones. Some are gateways into entirely new arenas. The key is to recognize which door carries the weight of generational shift. Financial restoration often unfolds in layers. The first layer is credibility. The authority's return restores trust in your name. The second layer is opportunity. Access is granted again. The third layer is multiplication. Additional streams begin to form because perception has changed. When credibility and opportunity align, multiplication becomes possible. You may also notice something unexpected: favor replacing former resistance. Where conversations once felt strained, they may now feel fluid. Where negotiation once felt defensive, it may now feel collaborative. This is a sign that the atmosphere has shifted. What once required persuasion may now require simple clarity. There is another dimension to financial doors reopening: timing. You may look back and realize that if the original opportunity had succeeded earlier, you would not have been prepared for the expansion that is now possible. Your skills have matured. Your understanding has deepened. Your confidence has stabilized. What once would have been overwhelming now feels manageable. This is why the generational shift matters. It is not only about getting what you once wanted. It is about being positioned for something greater than you originally envisioned. The authority who dismissed you may now offer more responsibility than before. They may invite collaboration at a higher level. They may introduce you to networks that were previously inaccessible. And as this unfolds, you must remain grounded. Excitement is natural, but stability is essential. Rapid reopening can create emotional acceleration. But remember the testing season. Remember the composure you developed. The steadiness is what will sustain this new access. There may also be moments of quiet disbelief. You may find yourself thinking, "Is this really happening?" That reaction is natural when a long-held door finally moves. But do not allow disbelief to sabotage momentum. Receive what is unfolding. Participate fully. Financial doors reopening also carry responsibility toward future generations. The shift you are stepping into is not just personal prosperity. It is structural change. It alters what is considered possible in your family line. It changes conversations about limitation. It creates new standards. And here is something crucial. When one door reopens, it often reveals others that were hidden behind it. The authority's return may lead to introductions, referrals, partnerships, and visibility beyond your original scope. This is the ripple effect of alignment. Do not rush. Do not overextend. But do not hesitate either. When doors reopen, hesitation can create mistiming. Step forward with confidence balanced by wisdom. You are not merely revisiting an old opportunity. You are entering a recalibrated season. The system that once denied you is now cooperating with your growth. The same environment that felt resisted is now receptive. And as these financial doors reopen, you will realize something profound. The dismissal was not the end. It was the narrowing before expansion. It was the pause before acceleration. There is one final layer to this shift that extends beyond contracts and currency. It touches influence, identity, and authority in ways that will redefine how you see yourself. And that revelation changes everything. At first glance, this entire journey appears to revolve around finances. A proposal dismissed. An authority reconsidering. Doors reopening. Contracts revisited. Resources flowing again. But if you look deeper, you will begin to see that the shift underway is far greater than money. Finances were the visible battlefield. Identity was the hidden one. When the authority dismissed you, it was not only your idea that felt rejected, it was your voice, your credibility, your place in the room. And that is why the return carries such weight. Because when they come back, they are not just reassessing numbers. They are reassessing you. Influence is more powerful than income. Income can fluctuate. Contracts can expire. Markets can shift. But influence reshapes environments. And what is being restored to you in this season is influence. The ability to speak and be heard. The ability to present and be considered. The ability to stand in rooms where decisions are made and not feel invisible. This is why the generational shift cannot be reduced to financial gain. Money may be the first sign, but authority is the deeper transformation. The same system that once overlooked you is now recognizing your presence. That recognition changes how others respond to you. It changes how you respond to yourself. There is a quiet transformation that happens when someone who once dismissed you now seeks your input. It alters your internal narrative. The voice that once whispered, "Maybe I'm not ready," loses its volume. The fear that said, "What if they were right about me?" fades. And in its place rises certainty, not arrogance, but grounded assurance. The return also redefines your relationship with authority itself. In the past, authority may have felt intimidating. You may have entered conversations feeling the need to prove yourself. But after walking through rejection, refinement, and restoration, your posture changes. You no longer approach authority from a place of insecurity. You approach from preparation. This shift in posture affects more than one relationship. It spills into future interactions. When you meet new leaders, investors, decision-makers, you carry the memory of restoration. You carry the knowledge that dismissal is not destiny. That knowledge radiates confidence. And here is something profound. When authority acknowledges you, it often extends beyond one individual. Their reconsideration can open networks. Their endorsement can alter perception. Influence expands quietly at first, then visibly. The people who once hesitated may now lean in. The rooms that once felt closed may now feel accessible. But there is another layer: family. Generational shifts do not stop at your name. When children, siblings, relatives witness restoration, it rewires what they believe is possible. They see that rejection can be temporary. They see that patience has power. They see that integrity outlasts dismissal, and that changes how they pursue their own opportunities. The shift also affects how you steward success. When money alone drives ambition, decisions become reactive. But when identity and influence are aligned, decisions become strategic. You are no longer chasing validation. You are building legacy. Legacy is the true measure of generational shift. It is not how much you accumulate in one season. It is how your breakthrough alters the trajectory for those who come after you. When the authority who once dismissed you now collaborates with you, it establishes a new standard. It communicates that you belong in spaces that once felt restricted. There is also spiritual authority, being restored. Rejection can subtly weaken spiritual confidence. You may have questioned your discernment, wondered if you misheard direction. But when restoration occurs, it reaffirms that you were not misguided, you were timed. And that realization strengthens faith. This is why the shift is bigger than money. It is about alignment between calling and opportunity. It is about restoration of voice. It is about reclaiming space that once felt inaccessible. And perhaps the most transformative aspect is internal. When the cycle breaks, you feel it. You sense that something long-standing has lifted. The weight of almost disappears. The pattern of near success dissolves. And in its place is stability. You begin to see yourself not as someone hoping for a seat at the table, but as someone whose presence adds value to the table. The shift in self-perception influences every future step. So when February 22nd marks this generational movement, remember, it is not merely about financial restoration. It is about influence reclaimed, authority balanced, identity strengthened. Money may open doors, but influence keeps them open. And what is being restored to you now is not temporary access. It is sustainable positioning. There is one final confirmation to this entire message. One closing alignment that seals the shift and sets the tone for what happens after midnight. And that final confirmation carries both assurance and instruction. Now we arrive at the threshold. The moment this entire message had been pointing toward. On February 22nd, a generational shift is underway. Archangel Michael confirms a financial authority who dismissed you will return. Open before midnight. This was never just a title. It was a warning, a preparation, a divine alert that something irreversible has begun to move. You have walked through the dismissal. You endured the silence. You survived the testing. You felt the sting of being overlooked by someone who had the power to change your financial trajectory. But heaven did not forget. The record remained active. The shift began quietly. And now the night that changes everything is here. Midnight is not simply an hour. It is a dividing line. It separates old cycles from new beginnings. It closes chapters that overstayed their season. And as February 22nd approaches its midnight moment, something profound is taking place in the unseen realm. Alignment is locking into position. Conversations are forming before they happen. Thoughts are stirring in the mind of the authority who once dismissed you. This is your final confirmation. The return is not random. It is authorized. Archangel Michael's confirmation signifies enforcement. What was delayed is now being released. What was misjudged is being reevaluated. What was prematurely closed is being reopened under new timing. And this time, it will not collapse under immaturity or instability. You have been refined. You have been strengthened. You have been positioned. But the instruction still stands. Open before midnight. Open your heart. Release resentment. Let go of the need to replay the rejection. Do not carry yesterday's wound into tomorrow's opportunity. The shift cannot settle fully if you are emotionally closed. This is not about forgetting what happened. It is about refusing to let it define what happens next. The authority who dismissed you will not approach you in the same way. The tone will be different. The posture will be adjusted. There will be recognition, even if it is subtle. And when that moment unfolds, you must respond with calm authority. Not arrogance. Not hesitation. Authority. Because this is not just restoration. It is elevation. The cycle that once followed your family line, the oldest breakthroughs, the near approvals, the last-minute denials, is ending. You are the turning point. The pattern loses power here. What once felt predictable becomes unprecedented. And understand this clearly, the shift will echo beyond one opportunity. What begins as a reconsideration becomes influence. What begins as financial restoration becomes legacy. What begins as one authority returning becomes multiple doors responding. The ripple effect will extend further than you can see tonight. Do not underestimate the significance of this hour. There are moments in life that feel ordinary while they are happening, but later you recognize them as pivots. February 22nd is a pivot. Midnight is the hinge. And your posture is the key. Stand ready. Stand steady. Stand healed. Because when the message comes, when the conversation reopens, when the opportunity returns, you will recognize it instantly. Not because it is loud, but because it aligns. You will feel the difference in the atmosphere. You will sense the completion of something that once felt unfinished. And when that happens, remember this message. Remember that you were told beforehand. Remember that the shift was already underway. Type "the shift is sealed" in the comments if you receive this word. Blessing code 905 is now activated. As you declare it, you are sealing your agreement with divine timing. You are stepping across the threshold with expectation. Now I release this final assurance over you. The same God who allowed the delay has authorized the return. The same heaven that recorded the dismissal has recorded your endurance. Peace will replace pressure. Confidence will replace doubt. Favor will replace resistance. The night that once felt silent will become the night that changed everything. And as the clock moves toward midnight, do not fear it. Welcome it. Because this midnight does not close your destiny. It opens it. What you have just heard is not entertainment. It is activation. When you support this mission through Super Thanks, YouTube membership, or by giving through the PayPal link in the description or the PayPal QR code flashing on your screen, you are sowing into generational restoration. The word declares that those who sow in tears will reap in joy, and tonight, you are helping someone step into that joy. I believe the Spirit is saying, I am inviting you to participate in this harvest. Your seed becomes oil that keeps this light burning for souls who are waiting for confirmation before midnight. Do not delay obedience. As you give, may supernatural favor accelerate in your own finances, and may every dismissed opportunity in your life be revisited with increase. Step into this moment. Act now.